Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Keely Ogden, I'm a writer, and I am the Vampire Girl. Today, we are continuing our Dracula marathon with Dracula, the 1979 version. The cast of this movie is stacked. In the role of Dracula, we have the devilishly sexy Frank Langella, who, fun fact, also played Skeletor. So if at any time during this review you start getting a little too hot and bothered, just picture this face. This film also stars Sir Laurence Olivier in the role of Dr. Van Helsing. Laurence Olivier was also in Hamlet with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing back in 1948. So we're all just kind of tied into the horror genre here. This movie also stars one of my favorite actors, Donald Pleasence, in the role of Dr. Seward. Now, Donald Pleasence was also involved in the horror genre a year before this movie came out in 1978. He was in a little low-budget independent film. You guys have probably never heard of it, so it doesn't even bear mentioning. Kate Nelligan also plays our incredible leading lady, Miss Lucy Seward. She is fantastic in this movie. She is so strong and amazing. I love her. This adaptation of Dracula was not only based on Stoker's original novel, but also on the 1924 stage adaptation, which is the same version that Bela Lugosi's Dracula was based on. And like Lugosi, Langella was also playing Dracula on Broadway when he was cast for the part. Langella was even nominated for a Tony Award for his portrayal of the Count. This film also won Best Horror Movie of 1979 at the Saturn Awards. We're coming in hot with a pretty slick resume for this film. If this is your first time checking out my videos, here is how it is going to be structured. I will give you a brief, spoiler-free summary of the film, as well as a smattering of my thoughts, and then I will give this movie's MPAA rating, as well as a score out of 5, and a score as a Dracula adaptation. Then, anyone who wants to leave and go and watch the movie without it being spoiled, you are free to do so. I will be giving a more in-depth analysis, talking about the plot, the characters, and sharing some of my favorite lines. Alright, let us jump into Dracula. Again. We start not in Transylvania, but on board a ship, which crashes during a terrible storm. The sole survivor is found by a young woman and is taken to safety. The stranger, Count Dracula, is incredibly charming. Too charming. And that's all you get, because this movie I can't really talk about without getting into spoilers. This movie is fantastic. Langella portrays Dracula in a way that we have never seen him before. He takes the character to new heights. Not only does he have Lugosi's charm, he is as imposing as Christopher Lee. And then he adds his own interpretation of the character. We see more of the human side of Dracula in this film than we ever have before up to this point. Langella is incredible. The rest of the cast in this movie is also really great, though I will say there are a couple who don't really pull their weight, and we will get into that in the spoilery part. But I'm gonna let you guess what character is the worst one. I'm gonna see, if you guys have watched my other videos, you'll probably be able to guess which character is the worst in the movie. This movie also has an incredible atmosphere. There's this permeating sense of darkness, but also of romance. The gray, desaturated atmosphere adds an incredible amount of weight and an incredible sense of horror to this film, and it works really well to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Now for scoring. Dracula 1979 is rated R. There is some terrifying imagery, as well as some implied saucy times. This is probably the most sexual Dracula movie up to this point. Not to say that it goes over the top at all, but there is a lot of heavily implied things. It's done very well. I'm not a huge fan of gratuitous nudity or sex in movies. This movie handles it incredibly well. It's very romantic. It's just really well done, trust me. It's good. Some scary moments though. I highly recommend you go check out this film, and I give it a rating of 4 out of 5. It's fantastic. Please go watch it. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's really great. Now for its score as a Dracula adaptation, and let me tell you, I was surprised by how things turned out. If you need a reminder, this is how our lineup currently sits. Dracula 1979, starring Frank Langella, gets a score of 76 as a Dracula adaptation, which means that it bumps out Lugosi by 1 point. I wasn't expecting it, and I will talk a little bit more about why in my spoilery section of the video, but here is how our scores sit for now. Langella is the one to beat, so good for you, man. Alright, spoiler-free people, this is your cue to exit the video and come back when you're ready. We're about to jump into spoilers. Are you gone? Alrighty. 3, 2, 1, go. This movie differentiates itself from its predecessors from the jump. We don't even get a scene of anybody going to Transylvania. Instead, we start on the ship. We start on the Demeter. They finally got the name right. It took 4 movies, but we finally got there. The crew is completely freaking out because they know that something in one of these crates down in the cargo hold is responsible for all of the death on board. So they try to throw Drac overboard, which is fantastic. They should have done that in the book. Like, dump the cargo, my guy. You're not getting paid if you're dead. However, he's Dracula. He's not going to go down without a fight and some throat ripping. Sillies. The ship conveniently crashes exactly where it needs to, and Dracula washes up onto Whitby Harbor. Right next to the harbor happens to be Billerbeck Hall. Right, editing me? Thank you. Which is home to Dr. Seward's mental asylum. It's also where he lives with his daughter, Lucy. And here we go with the name changes again. Let me break it down right now. In this adaptation of Dracula, Dr. Seward runs the asylum, as he should. Dr. Seward's daughter is Lucy. Lucy is engaged to Jonathan. Lucy's friend is Mina. Mina's father is Abraham Van Helsing. You get all that? I'm going to mix up their names so often throughout this video. My notebook is half scribbles because I kept having to scribble out Mina, Lucy, Mina, Lucy, Mina, Lucy, and switch them back. Please forgive me. Editing me will fix all of my mistakes like they always do, which I always appreciate. So, here we go. Mina is staying with Lucy and Dr. Seward because she is very frail and her father is traveling for work. Lucy is an incredibly brilliant young woman and she's actually planning on going to law school. She also helps out with her father's asylum and a lot of the inmates really love her. While Lucy is away helping her father with the inmates, because the storm has riled them up, everybody's kind of going crazy, Lucy goes to help calm them down. Mina is drawn outside of the house, where she finds someone washed up on the shore. This someone happens to be a very sexy man in a beautiful fur coat. Mina helps him back to the house and gets him help, and it turns out that this is Count Dracula, who happens to be moving in to the big old ruined house next door. The next day, the ruins of the ship are examined, and Jonathan Harker comes to annoy me from the moment that he's introduced. I don't know why so many of these movies take Jonathan and make him into the worst character. He's just the worst. I think this is the one where I hate him the most, because not only is he an idiot, he's kind of a jerk. He's a total jerk. He's a jerk in this movie. Ugh. Jonathan has come to take care of the Count's belongings that were on the ship. A lot of the boxes of earth were destroyed, but a lot of them survived, so Jonathan has them sent up to the Count's castle. And there is a ship porter there by the name of Milo Renfield that is put in charge of taking the Count's belongings up to his castle. Now, this is the first and the only adaptation that I have seen where Renfield actually gets a first name. He doesn't have one in the book. We get his first initials and then just his last name. So props to this movie for giving Renfield a first name. He's still not a good character, but at least he has a first name. So that's pretty neat. That night, the Count comes over to join everyone for dinner, and This movie is really great at showing how different Dracula is from everybody around him, and how everybody interacts with him. I don't know how to describe Langella in this movie without describing him as a sexual powerhouse, because honestly, that's the vibe that he gives off. It comes in so confidently and so suavely, and he speaks so well, and he just has this aura about him that gives off this incredible sexual power. Now, like I said, there is very little sexy time, like physical intimacy, in this film, and none of it is shown in detail. But the power that Langella gives off as Dracula is probably the most sexual part of this movie. He is incredible. We see some of Mina and Jonathan interacting during this party. They're dancing together. It's very awkward. They look like two middle schoolers who still think cooties is a thing. It's pathetic. And then Dracula comes in, and the women are immediately smitten with him, of course, because Frank Langella is delicious. I mean, look at the man. Do you blame him? But the way that they film him dancing with Mina is beautiful and intimate, not entirely in a sexual way, but just in a moment of pure connection between two people. It's very well done. He also has this incredible connection with Mina because, you know, of course, she is the one who saved him. She's the one who brought him to the house. She's very sweet to him, and he's super into her, so, you know. Dracula also has a great line when he and Mina are interacting, and Mina makes some kind of statement. Jonathan admonishes Mina for speaking out of turn, and then Dracula admonishes Jonathan and really, like, hypes up Mina and says, "I despise women with no life in them." Okay, king, shut it down. We love that. We love a supportive king. So Jonathan is already super jealous of Dracula, and so he and Mina sneak out that night to do a little making out. They hang out in the greenhouse. There's nothing nefarious shown, but why you in the greenhouse? Why you hiding away, huh? Sneakies, you nasties. That gives Dracula the perfect opportunity to sneak into Mina's room and get all up in her, which she honestly seems fine with for now. So, this is also one of the first movies to show Dracula actually scaling the walls, which is a big thing in the book. Jonathan in the book describes him as scaling the walls head down like a lizard, and this is one of the first movies we actually get to see that, so props to you, movie writers, for including that. That's very awesome. The next morning, when Mina is back in the room, her and Lucy are editing me. How many times did I screw up their names in that little talk about their soiree? Thank you, editing me. The next morning, Mina has come back from her little excursion with Jonathan, and she and Mina are still asleep. Mina suddenly wakes up, and she is gasping for air. She cannot get any air. She can't breathe. And Lucy is doing everything she can to try and help her. She calls for her father. She tries to get her to calm down. And it's terrifyingly traumatic. Mina lays in that bed, screaming, gasping for air, and dies. And it's horrific. It is so scary. Like, and it's so sudden. It was traumatic to watch. It was terrifying. Very well done. Mina obviously feels a ton of guilt because maybe if she had been there that night with Lucy, nothing would have happened. She just feels a lot of guilt, even though she really couldn't have done anything. They don't even know what happened. Dr. Seward sends out a wire to Mina's father, Dr. Van Helsing, and tells him to come to Whitby quickly because his daughter has just passed. I'm going to take this moment to talk about Donald Pleasance in this movie. He's one of the best parts. Now, I love Donald Pleasance. Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis in the Halloween series is fantastic. He's very passionate and very stalwart and very strong in those movies. In this movie, he is so fun. He is always eating. And I read in an article about the movie that he did that so that they wouldn't be able to edit out parts that included him in it. They wouldn't be able to like cut around him consistently because he was always eating, so it's hard to maintain continuity with food. So they just had to leave in all of his scenes, all of his dialogue. They couldn't cut things out that had him because he was always eating. And it was just so funny. Just this little old man sitting in a graveyard just... He's fantastic in this movie. He is so funny. I love Donald Pleasance. I love him. Jonathan, the next day, goes to see Dracula and to just finalize stuff with the house. And when he gets there, he can't find Dracula, so he starts shouting for him. And then Dracula literally just pops up from behind something and goes, "You don't need to shout." This movie, you tell him, King. Shut him down. He's the worst. Ugh, we hate Johnny in this movie. And they get talking about Lucy, her death, and Jonathan is surprised that Dracula even knows about it. Dracula hits him with the "News of death travels fast," which is a great variation on the line from the book "For the dead travel fast." I love that. I love it. I love it. I love this movie. It's so good. It's so good. To further shove in his face how much better he is than Jonathan, Dracula invites him, Lucy, and Dr. Seward over for dinner, and then says, "Oh, but you're not gonna be here, are you? You have work to do. Pity. I guess it'll just be me and your fiance and her father." Oh no. And Jonathan gets even more jealous because he's a little petty baby and he's the worst. After Lucy's funeral, Dr. Seward gets a page from Dr. Van Helsing that he's arriving, so Dr. Seward needs to go and pick up Van Helsing from the train station, and he tells Lucy, "Sorry, it looks like we won't be able to go to the Count's for dinner tonight." And Lucy's just like, "I'll go. It would be rude to cancel this, late in advance. So I'll go. You go pick up Van Helsing. I will go to dinner at the hot guy's house by myself. Thanks, Dad." So they split up and Mina goes over to Dracula's house for the night. The design of Carfax Abbey is so majestic. There is so much power and beauty in the design of this set, but it also feels so cold and sad, which fits the tone of this movie incredibly well. This movie is both beautiful and tragic. It's fantastic. From the set design to the clothes, the tone of this movie holds through all of it. Mina spends a long time over at Dracula's house, just talking about life and death and the night and what it means to exist. And Dracula tells her about how there are worse things in death, like living long enough to see all of your friends die, to just be alone forever. It's so sad, and she really, really feels an intense sympathy for him, and it's so good. It's so good in this movie. We cut back to the asylum with Dr. Seward and Dr. Van Helsing having just arrived, and there's something going on. There's an inmate at the asylum, a woman named Annie, and she has a baby. And I'm not sure why they're letting this lunatic keep a baby in this dangerous, dank, dirty-ass asylum, but they do. And then Annie is screaming about how somebody came in and murdered her baby, and we see it, which I was not expecting. I was not ready for that. I ain't showing it, but it was traumatic. Okay, it's not traumatic. It's very clearly a doll and some ketchup, but it was still a lot. And she says that it was Miss Mina who came in like a wild animal and then just snatched the baby away and then ate part of it and then jumped the heck out of a window and ran off. And this is like traumatic for Van Helsing, of course, because his daughter is dead and he didn't even get to go to her funeral or see her or say goodbye or anything. It's terrible. So sad. But he begins to piece together some things about what just happened at the asylum and what Dr. Seward has told him about her symptoms and about the holes in her throat and just what happened, he's starting to piece things together. He goes to the cemetery the next day and he meets Mina there. And the pair chat a little bit, and it's so sad. You really do feel very bad for him. Laurence Olivier does a great job as Van Helsing. He really captures the different levels of emotion that he has. Van Helsing decides to do a little vampire test, and that night he and Seward take a horse out to the graveyard, and if the horse senses the vampire, they'll be able to tell them where it is. Well, he points out Mina's tomb, and Seward and Van Helsing end up digging up the coffin, and they open it and they find it's empty, of course, because Mina's a vampire and she's very scary. And then they see that the side of the coffin has been broken out and it leads down into the set of mines that is under the town. I think that is so scary. She busted her way not out of the top of her coffin. That's pretty standard. We see that a lot. Zombie movies, I'm looking at you. We see the hand coming out of the coffin a lot. But busting out of the side of the coffin like a prisoner that just escaped a jail cell or like a wild animal that has just broken out of their cage was so scary. And so Van Helsing jumps down into the mines. And he has a crucifix and he has a spear. And I don't know how I feel about Vampire Mina's design. I like it, but I'm curious as to why it is the way it is. I'm not sure entirely what it was going for. If it was just going for creep, like, bravo, it's creepy. And the way that she speaks, the way that she says the word papa, chilling, terrifying, get away from me, you creepy thing, you, get away. And so she confronts Van Helsing, and she almost gets him before Seward intervenes. He decided to take a break from snacking on top of an open grave, and actually decided to come down and help. We love Seward. And he gets her away from Van Helsing and then is able to shove her back into the spear that Van Helsing is holding. And she slumps onto her father and he starts sobbing and holding her. And it's so heartbreakingly sad. Oh my gosh, the weight of his tears is just, oh, it hits. It's so good. It's so sad. Oh, it's so sad. Bravo for this one, especially. This moment, weird vampire design aside, was so powerful. This doesn't kill Vampire Lucy for good. So later they do still have to actually take out her heart. But that's a couple of scenes away, so we'll get back to that. But Vampire Lucy, we're not done with her yet. While Van Helsing and Dr. Seward are at the cemetery, Lucy is back at the asylum, and she is waiting for her sexy vampire boo to come in and do the deed. Dracula comes in and he seduces Mina, and the two are intimate. The scene is so much more about the emotion and the connection between the two of the characters than it is about what is actually happening. And honestly, we don't even know what actually happens because they don't show it. What we get is two people connecting physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I appreciate that. So props to you guys props to this movie for keeping that tone. The men come back. Jonathan arrives back from business, and the two older men return from the graveyard, and they find Mina half dead. We get a transfusion scene, which I love, as friggin' useless as Jonathan is. He gives her his blood, so I'll give him half a likability point, but I'll probably be taking it away before much longer because he's the worst. After he does the transfusion, Van Helsing takes a break in the study, and Dracula kind of sneaks up on him, and we get a really awesome spar between the two of them, both words and fighting. It's not as great as the one in the Christopher Lee Dracula. Nothing will beat Peter Cushing jumping onto a dining room table, but it's still very well done in this movie. And we also get a mirror scene. We get a scene, we get to see that Dracula has no reflection. Van Helsing gets to see that. He knows that Dracula now is the vampire. And Dracula escapes before Van Helsing can do anything too serious against him. Jonathan questions the men on whether or not vampires are real, because he's useless. And so they take him to the cemetery the next morning and they show him Lucy's body because they still need to take out her heart. And so Van Helsing brings a little hand mirror and he shows Jonathan, hey look, she doesn't have a reflection. I'm pressing this mirror into her face and she has no reflection. Get a grip, stop being an idiot. And Mina watches from the window as they are working on Lucy's body, and she knows what they're doing and she knows why, because now she is also part of Dracula's family. Mina ends up taking a carriage and trying to escape, but the men do chase her down and bring her back, and they end up having to lock her in the asylum. Seward stays behind to look after Lucy, and Jonathan and Van Helsing go to the Count's castle to try and find him while it's still light outside. They get there and they find that he's actually not in his coffin. He's wandering around in the dark place of the castle where they are. And Van Helsing says that he's surprised to see Dracula moving around during the day, during the daytime hours. And Dracula hits him back with, it's always daytime somewhere on Earth. And I'm like, you're right. And then he says, it's only the light that will harm him. It's not daytime hours, it's just light. Jonathan and Van Helsing barely escape with their lives. And we just get another example of Jonathan's uselessness, because Dracula turns into a bat to attack, and he latches onto Jonathan, and this grown man is laying on the ground wrestling with a little piddly bat while Van Helsing is trying to cave in the roof to let in some sun, and he's just screaming, help me, I'm like, bro, you are as thick as Cardi B, okay? You are not a small man, Jonathan. Get a grip. Get a grip, my guy. You are the worst. They do end up escaping, and they rush back to the asylum because Drac is up and moving, and they're like, bad things. So they go back, and Jonathan goes to check on Lucy, and he almost gets his throat ripped open by her because he's an idiot. But the men save him in time, and so we are confirmed that Lucy is going full vampire. Jonathan's the worst. You're probably wondering where Mr. Renfield has gotten off to. Well, he has ended up at the asylum. He's been there for a little while. And Dracula comes in and to see Renfield. And Renfield is like, oh no, I don't, go away, please. And Dracula's like, bro, you messed up. You told him about me, didn't you? And Renfield's like, no, I didn't. And then Dracula just 180s his head. Like, so fast. It's horrifying. It's so scary. He just freaking 180s and it's done. And then he breaks Lucy out of the asylum. Drac is just so powerful in this movie. He breaks Lucy out of the asylum, and the men give chase. They find that Dracula's coffin is being transported to the nearest port, and they are literally racing there in Jonathan's car. And Dracula manages to take control, or like to scare the horses enough that they just keep running faster and faster. And Jonathan ends up crashing his car because he's freaking useless, and they end up having to walk the rest of the way. By the time they get there, the Count's coffin is already on a boat, and they have to get out to the ship that it's on. The ship is named the Tsarina Catherine, And that tickles my little fangirl heart because the Tsarina Catherine is the name of the ship that Dracula escapes on in the book. So none of the other adaptations that we've talked about to this point have mentioned the Tsarina Catherine at all. And so it just really excited me that this one put in that little detail. So good. Jonathan and Van Helsing go to the ship, and they go down into the cargo hold and open Dracula's coffin and find that both him and Lucy are laying in it. They're snuggling. It's very sweet. Jonathan takes Lucy out of the coffin while Van Helsing gears up to kill Dracula. Mina wakes and starts trying to fight off Jonathan, and this distracts Van Helsing enough that Dracula is able to get up and spear Van Helsing to a wall. I'm sorry, did you just kill Sir Laurence Olivier? Did you just kill Van Helsing and we still have 15 minutes of movie? Okay, that's a lie. We have like 10 minutes of movie. Did you just kill Van Helsing with 10 minutes of movie left? Does that mean that Jonathan is gonna be the hero? Because if that's true, movie, I don't like you anymore. And I'm judging you. Jonathan is getting his little booty hole beat by his vampire girlfriend, and Dracula is literally about to finish him off when Van Helsing, with his last strength, gets a hook that's on a pulley, and he like stabs it through Dracula's back, and Jonathan is useful enough to pull a lever that hoists Dracula out of the cargo hold and up into the sun that is shining over the ship, and Dracula burns to death, hooked on a felon. And Lucy, bless her heart, she's trying to pull the lever back to lower him down, but Jonathan is just too strong, I guess. He couldn't wrestle a bat, but he can beat a woman at lever pulling. Lucy slumps down, crying, now that her lover is gone, and we see that Van Helsing is dead. Okay. Movie. Okay. Okay. But then, Lucy, as she is laying there looking up through the broken hull into the sky, sees a black cape flying away, and the movie ends with a little comforting smile spreading across her face. And that is Dracula 1979. That is how it ends. We get a little hint that Dracula is still alive and that he and Lucy will be able to be together forever. Very sweet. Yes, we don't want him to be lonely anymore. Langella is amazing. We get it. I actually really, really love this movie. Now, the darker tone is not for everybody. Casual fans of vampire movies may not vibe with it. But if you are a fan of the horror genre, I highly recommend checking out this movie. There is so much great atmosphere and tension building throughout this entire film. Jonathan is the main detractor, but that's kind of becoming a common thread in these films. So I don't know why I'm not used to it, but ooh, in this one, and it's his little mustache, his little Ned Flanders mustache. Ugh, he's the worst. Once again, I highly, highly recommend this movie. Please go check it out and let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next Saturday. Bye, guys!